Fortunately, some things remain forever, or another 10 years perhaps.
Yeah.
That little gem comes from Bob Camblin, the artist who's captured our attention today. Iconoclastic, enigmatic. I mean, those words feel like just the start, don't they?
Oh, definitely. That's a perfect entry point, actually. That quote, it sounds so offhand, right?
Yeah.
But it throws you straight into his way of thinking.
Yeah.
That paradox, the permanent versus the fleeting, that's a key current in pretty much all his work.
Exactly. So for everyone tuning in, think of this as our deep dive into the really intriguing world and mind of Bob Camblin.
Mm-hmm.
We've pulled together quite a bit, his own words, these sort of philosophical snippets,
Those quotes are great.
biographical details, different takes on his art, especially that drawing, Two Funky Hands, which we'll get into,
Oh, yeah.
and his incomplete works. The goal here is really to try and unpack what drove him. You know, his ideas about art, creativity, life itself.
And hopefully folks listening might find some new ways of seeing things, too, by looking through his lens.
That's the idea. We'll touch on everything from, well, what art is to personal transformation. And it gets really interesting when you see the links to Zen, maybe even the I Ching in his stuff.
It really does. So we've got his quotes, kind of a direct line, maybe?
Kind of, yeah. And the bio stuff, tracing his path, plus analyses of the actual art. So multiple angles.
Especially Two Funky Hands.
Right. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Bob Camblin, born in Oklahoma, 1928. It sounds like art wasn't just something he decided to do. It was just there from the start.
Absolutely. Both parents were artists, so his childhood was, steeped in it. Even in high school, he was the art director for the yearbook. Clearly had a knack early on.
And Ponca City, where he grew up, that wasn't just some sleepy town, was it? There was a specific kind of energy there.
It certainly had its own vibe. Oklahoma oil boom time,
Mm-hmm.
The huge Marland estate was there, the pioneer woman's statue. And interestingly, those double V's you sometimes see in his paintings, that's apparently a little nod to his mother, Viva Camblin. Oh, wow. Like his own pioneer woman.
Kind of, yeah. A personal touch.
Those little details add so much. And it seems like he made some key friendships early on that really lasted.
For sure. Forrest Harrisberger, they met in high school, stayed friends for over 60 years.
60 years?
Yeah. They were even in the Air Force Reserve together, sketching the California coastline. So even then, that artistic bond was strong.
It's amazing how those early things shape you. And it wasn't just visual input, right? He read a lot. He sounds like a real intellectual explorer.
Oh, completely. A voracious reader. Emerson, the I Ching, that ancient Chinese text.
Right.
And especially Japanese haiku and haiga. Haiga, for those who don't know, are these simple, beautiful sketches capturing everyday moments, often with a haiku.
Oh, okay.
And you can kind of see that sensibility in Camblin's work sometimes, that keen observation.
Then he gets the Fulbright to Italy. That must have just blown things wide open for him, artistically.
Oh, undoubtedly. Huge impact. Spending time in Italy, soaking up the Uffizi Gallery.
Yeah, the masters. And get this, the Capuchin catacombs in Palermo.
Whoa. Okay, catacombs, that's unexpected.
Right. Pretty intense. And that experience seems to have really stuck with him. You see echoes of it in his later mummy imagery. It's that mix of high art and, mortality.
Mummies. Yeah, okay, things are definitely taking a Camblin turn here.
Yeah.
And he didn't just absorb Italy, he sort of brought it back and mixed it up, didn't he?
Totally. Like he used Birth of Venus imagery, but as a tribute to KPFT radio in Houston.
Really? That's random and brilliant.
Isn't it? And Botticelli's Primavera inspired his painting Flora, which is masked and just packed with hidden stuff, hearts, electrons, even a little haiga tucked in there.
It's like layers upon layers, a conversation across centuries in one painting.
Pretty much. So after all this soaking up of art and culture, he moves into teaching. Seems like a logical step.
Yeah, sharing the knowledge.
For a while, yeah. Though interestingly, he actually started out as a map maker.
A map maker. Huh. Precision?
Right. Then he taught at several places. Ringling, Illinois, Detroit, Utah, and then Rice University in Houston.
But the academic life,
Yeah.
especially somewhere like Salt Lake City, it didn't quite fit, did it? Something felt off for him there.
Yeah, he found the Salt Lake scene a bit restrictive, apparently. So Houston and Rice were a big shift. But even there, his relationship with the whole art world, system galleries, the market, it was always complicated, resistant even?
Resistance feels like putting it mildly. I read about him hating the idea of painting just for money. Wasn't there that story with the $100 bills in a glass tube?
Yeah.
Like a barrier?
Exactly. That story says so much about his priorities. Artistic integrity over cash, period. For him, art purely for money seemed like, well, a corruption of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And he felt the same about showing art. He had strong ideas about curating thought, showing too much value game, miscellaneous disparate work at once, just confused people, diluted the experience. He wanted focus.
Which makes that decision in 1976 to just walk away from academia entirely. Wow, that's a huge leap.
It really was. He chose this nomadic life, just dedicating himself completely to making art. Traveling, soaking up different cultures, finding inspiration way outside the usual art circles. A radical move.
That commitment must have shaped his whole philosophy of art then. What were the core ideas driving him during that really focused period?
Well, a big aim was to get at subjective states of mind, to take symbols and make them feel mystical almost for the person looking.
Oh, okay.
He wasn't about art needing some long explanation or academic breakdown. He wanted a direct hit, something that spoke right to your gut, your soul.
Bypassing the analytical brain, maybe?
Pretty much. And those Musha Volantes works he did with Nancy Giordano in the 80s.
Yeah.
Perfect example. They made these optical illusions, things that mess with your eyes, challenge how you see reality.
Like Escher or Dali, kind of.
Yeah, echoes of that. Twisting the familiar to make you really look at what you just assume is real. What strikes you about that?
Just how active the art becomes. It's not just sitting there, it's doing something to you, making you question yourself. And he also pushed back against the whole artist ego thing, too.
Pervy. Big time. Signing things anonymous or anonymous artists, that was totally deliberate, undercutting that whole cult of the individual genius.
Yeah.
And his collaborations, like with Earl Staley and Joe Tate, calling themselves B&E Productions or the holding firm, and doing those unauthorized construction projects. That was all about blurring who did what, the energy of working together, not just one famous name.
Unauthorized construction, that's taking collaboration to a whole new level.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the images that keep popping up? Scarecrows, jars of water. They weren't just random props, were they?
Definitely not. The scarecrows, they started apparently from reading Gunter Grass, initially maybe about spring renewal.
What?
But they evolved into these really complex symbols for him, myth transformation, sometimes with weird stuff like lobster shells or larvae mixed in. And the jars of water, that was about transformation too. Turning stumbling blocks into stepping stones, finding potential in difficulty.
So everyday things get loaded with symbolic weight. And there were others, too, part of his personal visual language.
Oh, yeah. Gloves, you see those a lot, often empty or gesturing. Machined objects, that mix of organic and mechanical. Masks, obviously hinting at hidden selves or roles we play. And Saint Bambola, his own sort of invented saint or figure, they all weave together.
And the text that appears in his drawings, you said it wasn't just informational, more like part of the image itself.
Exactly. The words function like shapes, like visual textures, clues maybe, but also just something to look at. He actually called it guerrilla warfare on a word-oriented culture.
Guerrilla warfare.
Yeah, like resisting how we rely on words to understand everything, especially art. It reminds you of Tom Wolfe's The Painted Word, that idea. The words are there, but maybe to be seen as much as read.
So words as visual elements. And he had some big ambitions, didn't he? Not just tinkering around.
No way. He famously said he wanted to remake Goya in 20th century terms.
Wow, Goya. That's aiming high.
Right. Capturing that kind of emotional depth, maybe social commentary, but for his time. And he really believed, if you make authentic work, the muddy water would settle. You just had to have faith in your vision, regardless of whether people got it right away.
That idea of art as a game with traps, for the viewer, that's really interesting. What was he getting at there?
I think the traps weren't meant to be mean, but more like deliberate puzzles, ambiguities, paradoxes, things that don't quite fit together easily.
Okay.
He felt that bumping up against these traps, having to figure them out, could actually lead you to discover something about yourself. It forces you to engage, to question your own assumptions. It's interactive.
So the confusion is actually part of the point, an opportunity.
Kind of, yeah. And his whole questioning of reality, it seemed to go deeper than just surrealism's dream imagery, didn't it? More fundamental somehow.
Absolutely. There are surrealist vibes, for sure, but it feels less about dreams versus reality and more about, like, what is reality? How do we even perceive it? A deeper philosophical probe.
Yeah, exactly. Which leads us perfectly to Two Funky Hands. That drawing seems to pull so many of these threads together. Can you paint a picture of it for us?
Okay, imagine just incredibly detailed line work, almost like a scientific illustration, but of totally abstract, organic shapes.
Right.
And these forms aren't separate. They flow into each other, they merge, they split. It's hard to tell where one ends and another begins. Kind of human, animal, plant-like all at once, Biomorphic is the word, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all in stark black and white, which
Yeah.
really amps up the surreal, dreamlike feeling. There's this incredible sense of movement of everything being connected.
It really sounds like a visual echo of that interconnectedness idea, which definitely links up with Zen thinking. How does that perspective help us see this drawing?
Well, from a Zen angle, two funky hands really shows the illusion of separation, right? The way the forms tangle and blur suggests everything's part of one big reality.
Mm.
The ambiguity, the lack of clear definition, that echoes the Zen idea of formlessness, that things arise from and return to something beyond fixed shape. And the overall energy, the flow, feels like a meditation on how life and identity are always changing, always in flux.
And you mentioned the I Ching too, hexagram 29, can the abysmal or water. How does that fit in?
Can is about navigating deep waters, difficulties, using inner strength, being adaptable like water itself. So you could see the complex, tangled lines in the drawing as life's challenges, its messiness.
Okay, yeah.
But the fluidity, the way it all connects, suggests finding your way through that chaos, embracing the uncertainty, adapting, finding harmony even when things feel abysmal, finding flow.
So the drawing is almost like a visual koan, a meditation on change, letting go, finding peace in the unknown.
Exactly. Surrendering to transformation, maybe finding beauty in things not being permanent.
And you can definitely see the connections to surrealism there. That mix of dream logic and waking life, the abstract organic forms you see in artists like Hans Bellmer or Max
For
Ernst.
sure.
Yeah.
Camblin was tapping into that same vein, pushing past just representing things, getting into the subconscious, how we perceive. Two funky hands isn't just lines on paper, it's this deep dive into psychology, philosophy, all through his very unique visual style.
It's amazing, this rich, complex body of work, and yet Bob Camblin isn't exactly a household name, is he? His legacy feels both powerful and kind of hidden.
It does. He was definitely respected by artists who knew him, and collectors really go after his stuff, drawn to that enigmatic quality. The fact he wasn't chasing the market, that his work is relatively scarce, probably adds to the mystique.
Mm-hmm. And his book, Zen and the Art of Enlightenment, that feels like maybe an attempt to bridge that gap, to share his thinking more widely.
Seems like it. It gives you real insight into his journey, his philosophy. And hearing from people who knew him, other artists like Pete Gershon, Earl Staley, collectors like George O. Jackson Jr., Carolyn Farb, gallerists like Penny Serling,
Yeah.
their reflections paint this picture of someone enigmatic, yes, but also really influential, collaborative. And what keeps coming up is how personally people connect with his art, beyond just intellectual analysis.
That personal resonance. And it's good to hear there are efforts now to get a bigger museum show together in Houston. Feels like maybe his time for wider recognition is coming.
Yeah, let's hope so. And hearing Earl Staley talk about their friendship, sharing studios, Camblin's storytelling,
Mm,
it really humanizes him. You get a sense of the impact he had on people around him.
definitely. So as we start to wrap up this deep dive into Bob Camblin, what are the main takeaways, the big ideas listeners should maybe chew on?
I think a huge one is the viewer's role. Camblin wasn't giving answers. He was setting up situations, ambiguities, paradoxes, basically inviting you to make the meaning.
Right, active engagement.
Exactly. And embracing change, seeing interconnectedness everywhere, and maybe finding those little moments of everyday enlightenment just by questioning how you normally see things, cultivating curiosity.
That's a great summary. Which leads us to maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Something sparked by Camblin's whole approach. How might leaning into ambiguity, actually questioning your own assumptions, unlock a deeper way of seeing not just art, but the world? Could those traps he sets in his art, or the ones life throws at us, could they actually be paths to discovery if we met them with curiosity instead of frustration?
That's the question, isn't it? His work is just this constant invitation to explore exactly that.
Yeah, so we definitely encourage you to look deeper into Bob Camblin and his incomplete works. It's a really rich world to explore.
For sure. Who knows? It might just change how you see things.
Yeah.
Permanently.
Yeah.
Or maybe just for another 10 years.